What happens when a single sentence at work quietly changes everything between two people who trust each other? Hello, everyone. I hope you're having a wonderful day. Today, we're going to explore a moment where pressure, pride, and unspoken emotions collide on a high-stakes construction site, testing both leadership and love. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next episodes. Morning arrives quietly, the kind of morning that doesn't announce itself. The light slips through the thin curtains in soft layers, pale and gentle, resting on the edges of the room. Outside, the city is still half asleep, sounds distant and muted, as if the world is holding its breath. Linda wakes first. She lies still for a moment, listening, not to noise, but to the absence of it. No alarms, no urgent calls, no raised voices from a construction site miles away. Just the slow rhythm of breathing beside her. She turns her head slightly. Quang is asleep, one arm bent above his head, his face relaxed in a way she rarely sees during the day. There's no tension in his brow, no tightness around his mouth. For once, he looks like a man who isn't carrying the weight of an entire project on his shoulders. Linda studies him longer than she means to. There's something unfamiliar about this feeling in her chest. Not excitement, not fear, something steadier, safer. And that realization unsettles her more than she expects. She slips out of bed quietly, careful not to wake him. In the small kitchen, she moves on instinct. Coffee grounds, water. The familiar hum of the machine filling the silence. As the aroma spreads, she leans against the counter, wrapping her arms around herself. For the first time in days, her shoulders loosen. She carries her mug to the window and watches the street below. A vendor setting up early, a motorbike passing slowly. Life moving forward without urgency. Her reflection stares back at her in the glass. Strong posture, calm face, but behind her eyes, questions are beginning to form. Is this what peace feels like? Or is it just a pause? Behind her, she hears movement. Quang appears in the doorway, hair slightly messy, eyes still heavy with sleep. He doesn't say anything at first, just watches her for a moment, as if memorizing the scene. "You're up early," he says softly. Linda turns, lifting her mug slightly. "Couldn't sleep." He nods, accepting that answer without pushing. That's something she's noticed about him. He rarely demands explanations. He pours himself coffee and joins her by the window. They stand side by side, not touching, but close enough to feel each other's presence. For a while, neither of them speaks. Eventually, Quang breaks the silence. "We should head back today." Linda already knows this. The thought has been hovering at the edge of her mind since the moment she woke up. "Yeah," she says. "We should." There's a beat. Something unspoken hangs between them. "The site won't wait," he adds, half joking, half resigned. She smiles faintly. "It never does." They sit down at the small table, the morning light shifting as the sun rises higher. The conversation drifts toward logistics. What time to leave? What needs to be checked first? Which meetings can't be delayed? It's familiar territory. Safe. But beneath it, Linda feels a growing discomfort. She watches Quang talk, his tone calm, measured, already back in leadership mode. And suddenly, a thought surfaces, uninvited and sharp. Have I started leaning on him too much? The idea tightens her chest. She remembers the past few days, how easily she had relaxed, how natural it felt to let him take the lead, to let herself rest. It scares her how quickly she adapted to that comfort. "What?" Quang asks, noticing her distant look. "Nothing," she replies too quickly, then corrects herself. "Just thinking." "About the site?" She hesitates, then nods. "About everything." He studies her, but doesn't press further. Instead, he says, "We'll handle it, like always." It's meant to reassure her. Instead, it makes her feel strangely alone. After breakfast, they pack in silence. The room, which had felt warm and intimate hours ago, slowly returns to being just a temporary place. Linda folds her clothes neatly, movements precise, controlled. She can feel herself pulling inward, building walls she hadn't realized she'd lowered. On the drive back, the city fades into wider roads and open stretches. The sky grows heavier, clouds gathering in uneven layers. Quang keeps one hand on the wheel, the other resting loosely by his side. He glances at her occasionally, sensing the shift in her mood. "You've gone quiet," he says. "So have you." He smiles slightly. "Fair." They share a brief look, then both turn their eyes back to the road. The closer they get to the site, the more Linda feels the weight return. The familiar tension settles into her shoulders like an old habit. She straightens unconsciously, her expression sharpening. Her phone vibrates. She looks down. One missed call, then another. A message follows. "Urgent. Call me ASAP." Her fingers tighten around the phone. "Something wrong?" Quang asks. She doesn't answer immediately. She calls back. The voice on the other end is tight, rushed. Too many words spoken too quickly. Technical terms. Numbers. Delays. A mistake that shouldn't have happened. Linda closes her eyes briefly. "I'll be there in 30 minutes, she says, her voice steady despite the sudden rush of heat under her skin. She hangs up. Quang doesn't need to ask. He already knows. "Serious?" he says. She nods. "Potentially." The silence that follows is different now. Tense, charged. When they arrive, the site greets them with noise and movement. Machines running, workers gathering in small clusters. The air smells like dust and metal. Linda steps out of the car, already in work mode. She moves fast, scanning faces, reading the energy. Then she hears it. Not directed at her, not meant for her. A voice. Low, dismissive. "She's good, but this is bigger than her experience." Linda stops. The words hit harder than she expects. She doesn't turn immediately. She doesn't react. Years of control hold her in place, but something inside her fractures slightly. Quang hears it too. He stiffens, his jaw tightening. His instinct is immediate, to step in, to shut it down. But he hesitates. Leadership is about balance, about choosing when to speak and when not to, about knowing whose words carry weight. Linda turns to face the site again, her expression unreadable. She takes a breath, then another. "Let's start with the report," she says, voice clear, professional, leaving no room for doubt. Quang watches her walk forward, shoulders squared, eyes focused. He realizes then that whatever decision he makes next, whether to speak, whether to stay silent, will change more than just the project. And Linda, standing in the center of the noise, already knows this too. The calm of the morning feels very far away. The meeting area fills quickly. Workers gather closer, tablets and printed reports passed from hand to hand. The hum of machinery continues in the background, but something else now dominates the air. A quiet tension, sharp and watchful. Linda stands at the front, eyes moving steadily across the numbers on the screen. Her posture is straight, composed, every inch the leader she has trained herself to be. No one would guess that a single sentence spoken moments ago is still echoing inside her head. This is bigger than her experience. She ignores it, or at least, she tries to. "Start from the beginning," she says, her tone calm but firm. "Timeline, cause, current risk." The site manager clears his throat and begins explaining. A miscalculation, a delayed material delivery, a chain reaction no one had anticipated. As he speaks, Linda listens closely, asking precise questions, catching inconsistencies before anyone else does. Quang stands slightly behind her, arms crossed, observing. From where he is, he can see everything. The way the team watches Linda, the subtle doubt in a few faces, the unspoken question hanging in the air. Will she handle this? He knows the answer. She already is. But leadership isn't just about competence, it's about perception. And perception, he knows, is fragile. As the discussion continues, a senior partner steps forward. His tone is measured, polite, but edged with something sharp. We should consider bringing in additional oversight, he says, given the scale of this issue. Linda looks up slowly. Additional oversight, she repeats. Yes, someone with more direct experience in this type of complication. There it is. The room goes quiet. Linda doesn't respond right away. She glances down at her notes, flips a page calmly, buying herself a second. Not because she needs time to think, but because she needs control. I'm open to support, she says at last, if it adds value. But let's be clear about the problem first. Right now, we're dealing with a logistics bottleneck, not a structural failure. The partner nods, unconvinced. Still, this project can't afford mistakes. Neither can I, Linda thinks. Quang feels it then. The shift. The moment where neutrality begins to feel like betrayal. He steps forward. With all due respect, he says evenly, Linda's assessment is accurate. The data supports it. All eyes turn to him. She's handled 3 comparable situations in the past year alone, he continues. Successfully. The partner raises an eyebrow. This one is different. Every problem looks different when you don't understand it yet, Quang replies. The silence stretches. Linda doesn't look at him. She keeps her gaze on the reports, as if his intervention means nothing. But inside something twists. She didn't ask him to step in. She didn't want him to. The meeting moves on. Decisions made. Tasks reassigned. On the surface, everything returns to motion. But underneath, the fracture widens. When it's over, Linda walks away without a word. Quang watches her go. He finds her near the edge of the site, standing alone, staring at the unfinished structure rising into the gray sky. Wind pulls at her hair, but she doesn't move to fix it. You didn't need to do that, she says without turning. He stops beside her. Yes, I did. She finally looks at him. Her eyes are cool, guarded. I had it under control. I know. Then why? He hesitates. Because the truth is complicated. Because I heard what they said, he answers, and I wasn't going to let it stand. Her jaw tightens. That wasn't your call. It was my project too. She exhales sharply. That's exactly the problem. The words hang heavy between them. Linda turns away, taking a few steps, then stopping again. I don't want to be the person people defend, she says quietly. I don't want to be the risk someone needs to manage. That's not how I see you. That's how they do, she replies. And when you step in like that, you confirm it. Quang runs a hand through his hair, frustration flickering across his face. So what was I supposed to do? Stay quiet? Yes, she says immediately, then softens, just a fraction. Sometimes. They stand there, the distance between them no longer physical. Her phone buzzes again. Another message, another reminder that this day is far from over. I need to focus, she says. We'll talk later. He nods, even though it feels like a dismissal. The rest of the afternoon blurs into movement. Linda throws herself into work, double-checking numbers, reassigning teams, pushing herself harder than necessary. Every decision is sharp, precise, almost ruthless. No one questions her authority now, but the cost is visible. to those who know how to look. As evening approaches, the sky darkens, rain threatening but never falling. The site slowly empties, one group at a time. Linda remains, reviewing reports alone. Quang watches her from a distance. He wants to go to her, to say something, to fix whatever just broke between them. But leadership has taught him something too. Timing matters. He leaves first. Linda notices. She doesn't react. When she finally packs up and heads to her car, the exhaustion hits all at once. The kind that settles deep in the bones, heavier than physical tiredness. She sits behind the wheel without starting the engine. For a brief moment, she allows herself to feel it all. The doubt, the anger, the quiet hurt she refuses to name. Then she straightens. She starts the car. Across the site, Quang stands by his own vehicle, watching her drive away. He doesn't wave. She doesn't look back. Both of them understand something now that neither is ready to say out loud. The space between them is no longer just silence. It's a choice. And whatever comes next will demand one from both of them.
Dưới nắng sớm, bà vừa chặt mía vừa kể chuyện ngày xưa. Dậy chặt 3 hoặc 4 khúc cho đẹp để bán được giá. Đồng mía cao dần, 45 đồng trở thành hy vọng cho phiên chợ. Một cây mía đổ bất ngờ khiến cả nhóm kêu, rồi cười xòa vì kịp đỡ nhau. Chiều xuống, Linda buồn bã vì con rúi của mình đã biến mất. Nghi có kẻ trộm rình quanh nhà. CEO Quang ghé đến lắng nghe và trấn an và tự sửa chiếc camera cũ trong kho, kéo dây lắp trước sân nhà để bảo vệ cô. Đêm đến, Linda nấu cơm nếp cẩm mời anh ở lại ăn. Hai người trò chuyện lòng ấm lại. Quang kể áp lực công ty, camera nháy sáng, bóng lạ thoáng qua, và không biết Linda có sống sót qua được đêm nay không. Mọi người nếu thấy video hay, hãy cho mình một like, một subscribe. Cảm ơn mọi người nhé.